Yeah, because it all does come back to, you're doing all this and you've set out what your focus is, and the reason you're doing it, obviously, is to convert that person at the other end. So this is all very good for driving the traffic to your offer. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about, I know that's a strong point with you as well, the creating the offer, and how do you persuade someone to, buy?
Right. Well, here's the thing that people need to remember when you're doing all of these things. Only polarized people buy things. Only polarized people buy things, and you have to be seen to sell. You have to be seen to sell. So if you're not taking a stand, the only thing that happens when you ride the fence, when you sit on the rail, and hopefully this is one of those euphemisms that'll transfer over to Australia, but I think it will. When you sit on the rail of a fence, and you try and balance that way all the time, and you never take a side, the only thing that happens is you get splinters in your crotch. And nothing else happens. Nothing good happens from that, because you can't please everyone all the time. So it's better to please a hungry crowd of people who agree with you than it is to try and appease a crowd who couldn't care less. And so that's what polarization is all about. Polarization is taking a stand and saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I believe. And so if you'll think about that, and and it doesn't mean that you have to be a jerk, it doesn't mean that you have to be mean, it doesn't mean you have to be any of those things, but it means that you have to be transparent and relevant and say the things that the people who could potentially buy your products or services can come down off that fence and agree with you on. You've got to knock them off the fence to get them to buy. So that, so when I'm looking at constructing an offer or even a persona, I'm looking at how do I create that polarization. And then the next thing is that I'm looking for, what does it take to get these people to say yes to something? So we constantly look at the psychology of, the psychology of consumption, for example. There was just a recent research study done that said that to get people, if you get people just to try something briefly, they're much more likely to consume it longer term than if they don't try it at all. So even things like bitter medicine and those kind of things, if they'll try it and they have like an immediate result from it, then they're much more likely to engage it much longer than they are if they don't try it or if they don't have an immediate result. So whatever we can do to give people an immediate result, listen to this, do this thing, see what's going to happen as a result of doing it, and I'm going to teach you 30 more strategies when you buy the product, gives people that sort of immediacy, and that causes them to say yes more often. Things like giving to receive, the law of reciprocation still works. If you give people something in advance, they're much more likely to engage with you, which is one of the values of social media. Why we create so much video and blog posts and that kind of thing, because we're preemptively giving, and as a result, what we're getting then is people who are saying, boy, this person has given me so much, I need to do something in return, and so they do.
I think, and obviously when you've got your book and you went through those processes to try and sell, or did sell out your book, you're not necessarily going to get rich off selling a book. So that feels like, that's that first step. Obviously you give out great content, and then they take the next little step, which is once they know, yep, I'm happy with what Dave's putting out, the next little step is buying the book, and it's gradually you're getting them to make bigger and bigger commitments. What sort of, how do you see the process after they buy a book, and where do you go from there?
Well, for me, the book is the top of my funnel. So anybody, really, social media is the top of my funnel. That's the free line for me, right? So everything that I give away on social media is free. And then when I get them to engage and buy the book, I know that's the first step to establishing a profitable following, because there's two different groups of people for me. There's the people who haven't bought from me yet, and then there's the people who have bought from me. So the people who have bought from me obviously have moved further down into the funnel. They buy the book, they become more interested in what I do. They've given me an initial early yes, saying, yes, I trust you. Yes, I'm compelled by what you say. I want to read your book, and I want to see if my experience with your book matches my expectation. When experience meets expectation, then they move further down the funnel. They may buy DVDs like my Renegades of Persuasion, for example, for $200, or they may buy another product, or, a teleseminar I'm doing or something like that for $100 or $200. Or they may come to one of my live events for which they're going to pay anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000. But each time they make that purchase, they become more and more valuable to me, and they move further and further down the funnel. Not just valuable in the sense that they've spent more money with me, but valuable in the sense that the deeper they get into my funnel, the more religious they are in their willingness to help me spread my message, because these are my true believers. These are the people who are going to go out and defend me at all costs, whether I defend myself or not. These are the people who are going to go out and tell their friends and family to buy this product or service. These are the people who are going to get their colleagues to do it. These are the people that are going to come to my events and be my evangelists. So those people have tremendous value to me, and they're to be protected with great vigor.
I think it's funny the way, you can already start to see the parallels drawn between what you're talking about there and what happens in a cult. And, you get those few key members who, are the ones that are really, really strong believers. And it's, I think Cialdini talked about, the idea of, you look around to what other people are doing to get cues as to how you should be responding. I'm curious to know, sort of, as you're starting to build this up, how do you, help cultivate that and then help that propagate? Or do you just let them sort of go out and speak as they will?
No, and see, this is one of the biggest fallacies of word of mouth marketing. Everybody says word of mouth marketing is the best marketing I can get, but word of mouth marketing works both directions. If people don't understand what they should say about you, they'll say anything about you. And so my focus is to get as many people as possible who will take my message and repeat it verbatim as I can. And so I'm constantly telling people what are good things to say. I'm positioning it, and I'm not going out and being that blatant about it, like, please say this about me. But what I'm saying is, here's a message that I repeat over and over and over again so that you understand it, and then that's the message that you'll repeat, because people parrot what they remember. And so we want them to remember these certain things about us. And so when you look at building up this group of true believers, you want to give them things that they can talk about so that they can go out and tell people the best and most relevant things that will get those people then to jump into the top of your funnel and hopefully dive in deep and grab a book and tape set very early because they came in with a recommendation.
And do you have any way, sort of like, how do you integrate, when I think of testimonials and things like that, how does that sort of integrate into the marketing?
It's interesting because testimonials are undergoing a great change in the United States right now. The Federal Trade Commission has just come down really hard on testimonials. So everybody's backing away from testimonials here right now because, like, if there's any sort of financial claim or any sorts of claims about anything, pretty much, if you can't demonstrate it, the fines are tremendous right now. So people are backing away from testimonials. But having said that, if you do have legitimate testimonials you can use, particularly in Australia where the rules may be slightly different, testimonials integrated at every step of the way increase sales, because social proof, which is what a testimonial is, social proof is a psychological premise that's basically, it's best described as monkey see, monkey do. The seminal research around social proof was done when they had a person in New York City stand on the street and stare up at a spot on the building. And pretty soon, 3 or 4 people were looking up at the spot, and when those 3 or 4 people stopped and looked, then a dozen people were. When a dozen people were, 100 people were, and shortly after that, they had a giant crowd that was blocking up the street, looking up to see what was on the building, and the original person had gone. But people do what they see other people doing. Nobody wants, very few people want to be a pioneer, right? They don't want to be the first ones to break new territory. What they used to say in the United States is nobody wants to be a pioneer because they have, you can always tell who they are because they have the arrows in their back.
Yeah.
And that was from, back in when we were settling the West here, that was, the Native Americans who, shot the pioneers with their arrows. But that's sort of the same thing in business. Nobody wants to be the first one to go out and break the ground, and yet entrepreneurs do it all the time and they're successful. And from consumer standpoint, no one wants to be that first person to be the first one to try whatever the product or service is. And so what happens, though, is when they see a group of people trying it and those people are happy and excited, then they're much more likely to try it. Their resistance goes down, their natural inclination to question goes away, and they're much more likely then to engage and do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. So social proof with testimonials is an incredibly, incredibly powerful tool, highly persuasive, and I strongly recommend that you use them as much as you can because they will encourage people to do it. Now, here's what's interesting is that with social media, again, you get people who are retweeting or talking about you on Facebook or creating response videos or all of these kind of things, and they're doing it organically. And so they're providing social proof to people who trust and follow them without you asking them to do it or without it seeming contrived, as oftentimes testimonials do, because most people don't know how to give a good testimonial, and most people who are asking for testimonials don't know how to direct a good testimonial. So what ends up happening is they end up sounding like, one of those hucksters on the street or, on television, and you don't come up with really good, genuine, heartfelt testimonials that move people. But what happens with social media is oftentimes whatever people say extemporaneously is often very heartfelt, truthful, transparent, and full of emotion, and those are the ones that convert best.